Okay, so now we've completed this general eye area. I'm going to move on to do the top bit next. Now, I want to get this like white down above the eye and the markings where it's actually quite bright. But before I do that bit, I'd actually quite like to get the section next to the white done first, so that it will help me to work out the tonal values within the white as to how light or how dark I actually want to put them. So the first section I'm going to do is in this top left section, and I'm just going to look at this orangey bit of fur here, and then the dark bits here. Now, because I don't want to accidentally smudge my lovely work that I've already done, I'm going to pop down a piece of tracing paper just over the top, just to protect it a little bit. Okay, now before I begin with my lightest layers, just like I have done previously, I'm just going to soften off some of these edges, these outline edges, a little bit, because they're quite dark here. So I'm just gonna use my blue tack, or you can use your putty rubber, and just soften them off a little bit. Not so you completely lose them, you don't want to not know where you're going, but I just want to soften them off a little bit. So I'm going to start with the lightest colour. Now, if I look really carefully at my reference photo within this section, the first thing I notice is there's actually a couple of strands of hair in this bit here that are almost white. They're very light, and the same here, there's just a little bit here. So while I don't necessarily want them to stay completely white, I'm going to get my white pencil, and I'm just going to use a mid kind of pressure, and I'm just going to carefully draw on a few hairs, not too many, but just a few, in those lightest areas, just so that when I'm doing the washes, we should hopefully have a few lighter bits showing through. So nothing too much, just a few. Now you may wonder then, what colour do I actually need to do as a base coat? Well, what I like to do is actually have a look and pick out those really lightest areas. So for example, this bit down the bottom particularly is lighter than at the top, and we've got a very nice kind of brown, very pale orangey brown colour, very muted, and that would actually make a good undercoat for up this section as well to build on. So I have chosen a brown ochre 10%, which is the lightest of the brown ochres here, and as you can see, it's kind of a, well, it's as it said, it's a brown ochre, but it's an extremely pale one, as you can see here, and that will make a good base coat. Now mine, as you can see, is quite blunt, and I'd quite like to get a nice sharp pencil to get a fairly even kind of a coverage as my base layer. So having given it a sharpen, so I've got a nice sharp point, what I'm going to do is look at the direction the hair is shaped around the body. So it's kind of going up at an angle up here. So I'm going to start by carefully just washing, using a backwards and forwards motion, but in the direction of hair growth, and I'm going right up to that pencil line that we can very lightly see. Now don't worry if you can see it still coming through just lightly, and the reason I say don't worry in this instance about it showing through lightly is because this is a dark section next to it, and what we're going to do once we've got this done is we're going to do some of those blacks and dark blues and whatnot over the top, and that will, being a dark colour, it will cover it up. As long as your pencil's not too heavy, if it's just very faint, then that's okay. Now I'm using a light pressure. Anywhere it's a bit darker, like in here, I've just done a couple more layers because I'm already thinking about those tonal values. And in this section where it's really light, I've just reduced my pressure right down and just done slightly less. So as I'm coming into some of these darker bits, I'm just doing a few layers, and the same up here. Now I am going to go right into that dark section as well that we've got in that top corner. That's okay. And then I'm just, as I said, we've got to have the black coming down anyway, so I'm just overlapping on there. And like I said, already just sort of starting to think about tonal values just a little bit. You won't see a massive shift in colour because it is a light colour, but just already kind of thinking in my head where they want to be. So we've got a nice light base layer for us to work on now instead of the white paper, which obviously makes it easier if you get quite a smooth base layer down. It makes it easier when you're layering the other colours, because when you're doing the strands of hair and the lighter colours are showing through, you won't obviously get so much of the white of the paper showing through. You'll get the base layer. Well, that's the idea anyway. So the next colour I am going to do is another light colour at this stage, and I'm just conscious that some of this sort of browny orangey hair that we have, particularly in this lower section here and the bit coming out of where the black hair is, the markings, it has a slight pinky tinge to it. So if you zoom in on your picture, you can see there is a slight pinky tinge. Now obviously I don't want to go too pink at this stage, so I have chosen a burnt sienna 10%, and this is actually one of my favourite pencils, and I do use this a lot because it's a nice kind of a muted pinky purpley tone to it. So what I'm going to do is I don't want to completely cover it. I'm going to just put on a few strands of hair, particularly, like I said, nearer the black markings, because that's where it is. And if you watched part 1 of this video, you'll know that I talked about how when you're doing individual strands of hair, there's a couple of things to remember. The first thing is you want to start at the point the hair is growing out of the body, and then because you'll find your pressure's slightly heavier there, and then when you do your stroke, you're flicking, and as you lift your pencil off, you'll be reducing your pressure and creating more of a tapered effect, which is what we want to achieve. Whereas if you do it the other way round, you'll find you're heavier on the tip of it, where we actually want it a bit more pointy and a bit softer, and it will just be a bit back to front. So and the other thing is, when you're doing these kind of few individual strands, don't be too precious about them. You don't have to sit here and draw them really carefully at this stage. Just literally, it's speedy, it's quick. Change your direction of your pencil slightly each time. Just move your hand like this backwards and forwards, just so that they're overlapping in a natural way, rather than it all going in the same direction, because otherwise it will look like he's been to the hairdressers when he hasn't. So having got just even those two base layers down, you can already see we're thinking about the tonal values. We've got indication that it's the hair, and now we can kind of build up the colours a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is actually get my olive brown, which is this one here, which isn't too dark a brown, but it's obviously got that slight, just a very slight greeny tinge is what I'm trying to say to it. Well, if you like, look in this top corner for it section on your reference photo, it's a brown, but it's got more yellow within the brown. So this is an ideal colour for that. So what I'm going to start doing, as I'm thinking about my tonal values, is I'm going to wash some in this top corner a little bit, and you'll see it's not quite the right colour, and that's okay, because we'll add other tones over the top of other colours. So, and I'm just going to, while I'm washing in that section, I don't want to create a hard line on the edge, so I'm just doing a few individual strands into that section. I'm also going to put some towards the black area, as we said, where it's a little bit darker. Again, I'm just using a really light pressure, and we have obviously got some bits in this darker section at the top. Now, don't completely cover it, because we do want some of the lighter hair to be showing through the lighter paper for the lighter hair. So don't go too crazy. And then on this section here, I'm just going to, it's not quite so much of this colour, but just towards the edge where the black hair markings are, I'm just going to add just a little bit, and just the odd strand in that lighter section. So you can already see I'm thinking of this bit as being a bit lighter and this bit as being a bit darker. Now, obviously, having gone for the yellowy tones, I want to make sure I don't lose those pinker and orangey tones within there. So I'm actually going to go for the pinker first. I've got down a burnt sienna 50%, which, as you can see, is obviously we've used the 10%, that pinky colour. We've now gone for the 50%, which is obviously stronger. And particularly if you look on the edge of those dark markings, there is quite pinky tones coming through. So I'm just going to gently stroke a few hairs coming out of that dark area there, particularly, just so I don't lose those. And I'm also going to wash them into this darker section. Now you'll see by putting it on top of that olive brown we put down, that the pink then balances it out, so it's not quite so yellowy, but there are still some yellow tones coming through within that brown section. So now this bit here we don't need as much. We have got some on where those dark markings are. So, and just again keep looking at which way the hair is actually growing. And just a tiny bit in that lighter section, just so to blend it in really on the edge, just so it's not quite such a hard line. Now I can obviously see by looking at this point I need to get in more of those orangey tones, and it's not a bright orange, it's more of there's two kind of tones of orange going on. There is more of the orange, which I'm going to use a burnt ochre 50% for, and then there's more of the browny orange, and I'm going to use a brown ochre for that area. But I'm going to start with the orangey one first, and then I can always dull it down a little bit. So I've got the burnt ochre 50%, and particularly at this bottom bit here, I'm going to use light pressure. So I can see how orange I actually want to take it, because it's not that orange, but they're just hints and tones of it. So again, working towards that black edge rather than the lighter area, only a tiny bit there, and then just a little bit in this top section, particularly in the darker, well, the mid kind of tones. And it's okay if you go over the top a bit of that, what we've done in that top corner as well. So just loosely add a few strands, and you'll see that it's starting to build up the layers, which is key when we're doing a realistic effect with the fur. You need your layers, They don't all have to be pristine layers. It's just literally building it up to create that kind of realistic painterly effect. So I'm just going to stop and have a little look now and decide on how it's actually going. Now, what I will say is that very top corner needs to be a little bit darker, and it's darker than the pencils I've actually pulled out. So I'm just going to have a think about what sort of tones I can see in there. Now I can see some grey brown tones, so I think I might try a little bit of the French grey, which is the browner grey, and I'm just going to use that just to just wash in just a little bit in that top corner and just do my strands out just to darken that section a bit. And I can even just use it to do a few of the darker hairs within that section. Don't need to do too many. And again, even down here where it comes out of the black fur and it's a bit darker, you can just add just a few. It's not so much in this area, it's a bit more pinky in this area. It's more at the top, but that's actually helping to darken that up, although that corner might still need to be a little bit darker in the end. But looking at that now, I think what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to get a little bit of Naples ochre, which we've used in the eye, and I'm just going to do a few strands here in this lighter bit, simply help to blend it out a bit, and also being a warm colour, I'm going to add just a bit into here as well. It will help to lift it a little bit. That yellow on top of the orangey browns will just warm them up and lift them a bit. So I'm using a light to medium pressure, but just combination of washing and stroking. And as you can see, because we've got the layers underneath, it's starting to kind of blend them together a little bit. Now I'm going to go back and reuse some of my colours just to really get that realistic effect. So I'm going back to my burnt sienna, the pinky, and I'm going back to this because I want to balance between like the pinky and the orangey and the brown tone. So by rotating through those kind of colours, it will help to keep it nice and balanced, rather than going too far one way. So just by doing that, just a gentle wash with the pinky tones, and I think I might add, what should I add? I think I might add a bit more of the brown ochre, just a few bits in places, just to warm it up a little bit in those warmer areas, and finish off with the burnt sienna 50% just to get some more of those pink tinges on the edges into the dark. Now, before I fully decide if I've finished this orangey area, as it were, I actually want to just build up that dark bit, so then I can truly see if I've got enough darks and lights going on in that area. I don't need to go too crazy with details. Just by doing those layers of marks and washes is enough to help create the illusion of the fur, without going mad on detail, because obviously the main focal point is the eye in this study. So we want the hair to look realistic, and above the eye we will have a bit more going on where it's closer to this kind of focal point. But as we come out towards the edges, then we don't need quite so much detail, as it were. So before I fully decide if I've what I needed to include else to tweak in there, I will do that dark, but I am just going to get my lighter colour again, the brown ochre 10% we started with, and I'm just going to use it to gently wash over some of those areas, just to blend in and push back some of those lines, just to make them a bit more natural looking, a bit softer, and just kind of bring it together a bit more. Now I can see it's looking quite pink, and actually I have a feeling once I've put that dark in I might want to get a bit more orange in there, but let's just plot in those dark bits first before making that final decision. Okay, so just before I actually put down this dark section, you will notice that there's this bit here where we have got some orangey, very pale orangey hairs, and some white hairs growing that are going across that darker section, and I don't want to lose them. So what I'm actually going to do first of all is I'm going to pop those in just to make sure we've got them secure. Now I have obviously got my pencil marks down there, and because these are light colours, I need to make sure that I really reduce that pencil marks down there, so that I don't get them stuck under the white. So what I am going to do, I can see there's a good white hair here, and so I'm definitely going to put that one in, and then I'm just going to randomly, using a firm pressure and a fairly sharp point, just draw in a few of those really white hairs first of all, just in that section there, and also make sure that your pencil is clean. I keep getting dark bits in mine, hence why I've now got a dark splodge there, but that's okay. I can I can work around that with the dark, because there is some dark hairs there as well. So remember as well, if you can't see them, just tilt your paper into the light so you can see where you've been popping them down. That's obviously, I'm going too far down now, so just be careful. I don't I just want to do that very top bit into the dark at the moment. Now we have got a couple of hairs that are long here that are going in, so I'm just going to use a firm pressure to pop those in, just so I don't fully lose them. Now the other thing is, obviously we said about the like lighter orange colour, so I've got my brown ochre 10% that we used as a base coat on the other one, and I'm just going to gently over the top of that, I'm just going to just wash in a little bit here, just so I've got a bit of a gauge where it's going and where that black marking is, and also just so we don't end up fully losing it, which is very easy to do. Now here where we have got some strands going in, I'm just gonna mark those in into that black area there. I'm not going to go too far down into here, because obviously we've got the white overlapping into here as well. I'm more just concerned about that edge at this moment. But so I don't lose those lighter bits, because obviously I didn't want to press too hard, because I don't necessarily want them that dark. If I press with a really firm pressure, I will end up with lots of really dark ones where I want it light. So by using a sort of a light to medium pressure, what you can do to protect it is you can just go carefully using like a medium to firm pressure. You can just wash over the tips of those where they're going into the black fur really carefully, and then by using that firm pressure over the top, the white will only mute it down a little bit because it's quite a light colour anyway, but it will just hopefully, fingers crossed, give it a bit more protection when we wash on that greys and blacks in that section there. So let's give it a try and actually see. Fingers crossed it's worked. So I'm going to, for this dark section here, it's obviously, there are some black areas that are quite pure black, but down here, particularly where the light is catching, you know, we've got some lighter greys and blues and purples going on in here. So I'm going to start with a base coat of my Payne's Grey 60%. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a light pressure to start with, and I'm just going to plot in where I want these marking to be. Now, using a light pressure should hopefully not cover up some of those whites and lights that we've put in first of all, but just go carefully. Remember, if you can always do little flicks the opposite way, which I know is against what I said earlier about which way the hair's growing, but when you want to go over into a light section like this, you don't necessarily want big fat marks at this end, then just lightly go the opposite way round, just to start plotting them in a bit where you want them to be. You'll find it easier and they're a bit softer, and then you can start kind of working around some of those white markings that those white hairs that we've popped in. You start to see them a little bit, and then you can always darken up around them, as it were, and yeah, just kind of then draw in the edges a bit more carefully. Now this end is obviously a bit darker, so I can use a medium pressure for my base coat up here. And also what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to flick over some of those, that orangey brown section just a little bit, just to start thinking about that edging. Now here, so obviously we have got a few darker bits, so we can start thinking about those tonal values and popping those in around some of those white hairs a little bit, using a slightly firmer pressure, and then go a bit lighter in that middle-y section, but we still want a base coat there. And then we want to, particularly as we come up to the top edge, we want to start thinking about flicking over the top of that darker section a little bit, and just start building that up. And like I said, even on this bottom section there are a few bits we can just go around the whites and make it darker. Now also, by darkening around the white, you'll make the white hairs pop out more, whereas if it's light next to light, you won't get the same effect. It won't stand out as much. So just, it's not like you have to go over every one. You'll see from your reference photo, it's not a solid dark at the bottom, but there are some darker strands, so just start thinking about that. So we've now got that kind of base layer down for it. I'm going to start building up the darks first. So I'm going to get my dark indigo, that blacky blue, because we have got some blue elements within here. If you look at the colours carefully, it's not a solid black colour. There's blues, there's purples, there's even some reddy tones. So I'm just going to go carefully around this bottom edge where we've got the hairs coming in, just so we don't end up losing some of those, because this is a good time just to help shape them a little bit. and where in those darker bits you can use a medium to firmer pressure to get some depth in there, and then sort of a light to medium in the middle sections, and then obviously in the lightest bit just the light pressure just to get a little bit on there, and then stroke it out. So this time we are going from where the hair is growing outwards, so it's overlapping that lighter colour underneath, and again just loosely, and just slightly change direction of your pencil as you're stroking them on, and they're not quite so defined here, so you can kind of use, I've got the flatter side of my pencil for just for those ones that aren't so defined, a bit softer on this edge, and then when you want a really sharp point, then find that tip, that sharp point of the pencil a little bit more. As you can see the difference now compared to what it was, we've kind of got that, it's darker, but we've got that a slight bluey tinge to it coming along as well. Now there is some sort of purpley reddy tones going on in there as well. So what I'm actually going to do is get my blue violet. I'm not going to go crazy with this because obviously it's quite a strong colour, but in those darker sections, first of all, just lightly to a mid-tone, just put a few of those on. In the very darker sections you can obviously press a little bit firmer, and in that lightest section in the middle I'm just putting a very light layer because I don't want to obviously make it too dark, but we will lighten it up in a moment. And then just again, just like we did with the previous layer really, and just be mindful of those hairs coming in on the edges as well. And then just stroke a few off. And obviously that has gone really blue. Now, really bluey purple, I should say, which is good complementary colours as well for the colours that are going into the tiger, which is the other reason I'm using these sort of bluey purple colours in there as well, because it just gives it that really complements and just makes the picture more harmonious. What I am going to do now is I'm actually just going to get my black, because like I said, while I might not want a complete solid black, just black colour because it's a bit dead, black does have a place, and when drawing black objects I like to include a layer or two of black in it as well. It just gives it a bit more depth, it darkens an area, it obviously helps to achieve that black colour that we're looking for, but it does need those other colours within the hair as well, just so it's not flat looking. So I'm not going to cover the whole thing, I'm kind of looking for those darkest areas, and I'm just going to stroke on some strands just loosely again, just so that we don't cover the whole thing. Now also on this edge coming into the light, there are some lighter bits. We're gonna, once we kind of work on this area a bit more, we will tweak that side of it, as it were. What I'm just more conscious about getting that top edge sorted first. Now on that top edge, as we talked about earlier, within the other colour there is some reddy tones, so I've got my crimson aubergine and I'm going to put it within the black, but I'm just kind of going to overlap just a tiny bit because I obviously don't want to go too far across here. I'm finding I'm drifting a bit far, which is why often it's better to make sure you take the lighter further into the dark area and then overlap, because otherwise you can end up getting carried away and making the markings far bigger than they actually are and you intend to. So I'm adding a bit of red within to this black, not all over, just a few bits, and particularly towards that top edge, and just gently, very lightly, just take a few bits into the orange on those edges, just softly as they come in. Now it's obviously starting to build up depth. Now we said obviously there's this lighter section here, so the first thing I'm going to do to start lightening it is I'm actually going to try my Payne's Grey 30%, and that will lighten some of it, and then I will use my white to get just those few whiter bits. So I'm going to just look at my picture and I can see that this bit here is definitely lighter, so I'm going to use quite a firm pressure now, medium to firm pressure, and I'm just going to kind of just stroke on, not so I'm covering the entire thing. It'll allow some of those darker bits still to come through, but again I'm doing it in the same direction, starting where the hair's coming out up, to get those tapered edges at the top there. So like I said, I'm just doing strokes so you can see there's those dark bits still shining through. And then I'm going to get the white because I don't want to go too light all over, but this end I'm just going to it won't be white, and obviously depending on the pressure as to how light you want to make them, but you can just draw a few strands here and there just where that light is actually really catching on the fur. Now I'm just going to make sure my pencil is clean, because obviously going into the dark section you get black on the end of your pencil, so I'm just going to clean that off. And while I'm here, before I do that, I am just going to make sure it's clean. On this section here I'm just going to do a few bits into that lighter area as well, and also it can, by doing that, and do stop and keep making sure your pencil's clean, you can also just soften off a few of those strands if you need to. If they're a bit too much, you can push them back a little bit with the white, but like I said, if you're going into that dark, you need to make sure you keep stopping and cleaning your pencil, otherwise you are going to come a cropper. And then just check that edge. For me, I just want a couple more, just a few bits. I've actually got my dark indigo. Now I accidentally pressed a bit hard there. I didn't mean it to come out that hard. Now well, I think what I'm going to do is actually get my white and just try and push it back a little bit rather than erase it, and just go over the top to soften it off a bit. I think I might actually, instead of that colour, I think I might actually just go my black, and not so hard this time, and lightly I'm just going to do a couple of strands, just a bit more there on this side, not too many. And again, if you find you've lost any darkness anyway, you can just go back in and just add a couple of strands where you need to, and then you can already see that's starting to really build up that texture. And what it does show to me is that top corner here needs to be a bit darker. So I'm going to get my raw umber, and I'm going to get let's have a think, maybe sepia might be a bit too dark. Let's have a think about this. Sepia, more sepia. I think actually I might just try the raw umber first. add in a bit more. That's actually coming out quite a bit darker, so I can just do a few strands. Actually, that's working out quite nicely. That's just taking it a little bit darker. And I'm just going to take a few strands out from within that dark bit as well. And I have actually gone a bit further than I meant to with that dark, and that's a point to note to myself. Make them a little bit smaller next time, but it doesn't matter. It's not the end of the world if we've got it slightly wider. No one's going to sit there and do a measurement of it, I hope, compared to the reference photo. As long as it still looks realistic, then we're good. But yes, that's a good reason why. Note to self, make your marking slightly smaller because they will grow. And I'm just going to add a couple more light bits just to finish it off, coming into that dark section. Again, keep your pencil clean, and you can also just tidy up those strands that are going in particularly white with your white pencil, but each one make sure you clean it. I'm using a fairly firm pressure just to go over and tidy them up slightly. And again, if you want them to be a bit more of the browny ochre, get that 10% brown ochre and just you can just go over some of them just to get the different tone on them. And there you have it. So looking at this section now, what do I need to change? Well, I'm going to get that raw umber again, and I'm just going to get a few darker strands coming out here, not too many, but just on this, around that black. And I'm, note to self, going to take it a bit more into the dark area. And I'm going to get the burnt sienna 50%, just make it a bit pinker on those edges as well. So leave that light bit pretty light, to be honest. I might just add, there's a slight bit of grey in it, not much. I might just get my Payne's grey and just do a couple of very light strands just to kind of push it back a little bit. And if you want to, like, I've kind of lost my light bit there. I have gone wider, I know I have. Instead of lifting the whole thing off though, what I might do is just get a rubber, make sure it's clean. I might just get my Tombow and just gently stroke, make sure I keep cleaning it, over that lighter bit, and just pull it back a little bit like that. Because we had some of those white, do you remember right at the start we put some of that white in? Well, with a firm pressure. That's where this is really useful, because it kind of helps just to, that was kind of protecting the paper, and it just helps to lift it a bit. So again, oh dear, I just snapped mine. Hang on 1 second. See if we can fix it. Again, if you find you've gone up a bit much, you might be able to just actually use your Tombow just to gently lift a little bit on that edge, just to bring it back in a little bit and soften it and lighten it. Actually, that's worked quite nicely. The Tombow is fantastic for this sort of thing, because it's nice and fine, so that you can just bring bits in, like you're stroking with your pencil, really. And that's just reshaped it slightly. And then you can always, if it's obviously gone light, you can just choose one of the base colours that we had before. and just gently go over. So I've just got my 10% brown ochre, just to tidy that edge up slightly. And I know it's quite pink there, so I'm going to just put a tiny bit of the burnt sienna 50%, just a tiny few little strands just right on the edge, just to give that pink tinge to it, like so. Yeah, just make sure you're happy with those edges. If you want to soften off a dark bit, it's too dark, you can just use a lighter shade, a lighter colour like the grey, and just soften it off a little bit with a lighter shade. You can also use the Tombow on this bit here if you find that you make sure it's clean first, obviously. If you've gone a bit dark, you just want to lift out a few strands, and because we put that white underneath earlier, those lighter colours, just gently lift, and just make sure you keep cleaning it on the spare piece of paper though, because otherwise it will leave marks. And again, you can always just lift a bit, if this is a bit dark here, you can always just lift a few strands on the edge of this darker section just to lighten it as well. It just helps to lift a little bit and just make it a bit more realistic, really. Okay, before I just move on to this very light section, I am just going to pop in this darker little bit here, just so it's kind of filled in and joined up. And again, we've got a very dark kind of bit coming in here, but then it's dark, the marking, but we have got those lighter bits in. So I'm going to get the Payne's Grey 60 again, and I'm just going to actually mark in where I want it, really. Just to keep those plot it in. So we have got white above that and it coming down with some darker bits, but there are obviously some orangey bits in here, and I might need to just go back in and tweak where we want that in a minute. But let's just kind of just roughly wash it in the direction it's growing, and then we've got these darker bits overlapping here, and then it's starting to change direction slightly, so it's curving round, and we've got a lighter grey bit at the bottom, and then a dark, starting to get dark. I'm not going to go all the way down, I'm just stop kind of on that arch bit here. So we've got some where it's darker. I'm just going to start drawing in a few of those, press a bit harder just to start thinking about those tonal values. And it's definitely obviously darker at this top bit here, and then we've got darker and some lines coming over that here, but not to go too wide. So same kind of process as what same kind of process as what I did up here, really. So I'm going to go for the dark indigo next, and in that really dark section here I can use a medium to firm pressure, and then any darks, particularly dark kind of strands, I can use that medium to firm kind of pressure as well. And then where it's those sort of mid tones, lighter tones, I'm just going to reduce my pressure slightly so they're not so dark. And that way it'll also help helps to build that illusion of the fur texture, even right at this early stage without too much detail. It's just tonal values, so thinking in terms of those tones, just so by just using a different pressure you can already see the difference really. Now we put some of those white bits down, so I'm just gonna just make sure I got that bit right. And then I'm going to use the black this time and just start really building up that darkest area. So I'm using a firm pressure here in the darkest bit. But as we come towards that lighter section, I'm reducing my pressure right down to kind of blend it a bit more, so we haven't got like just a solid wall and stop. Obviously in those bits that are darker, that you can obviously see like the shadowed bits between the strands of hair, then press a bit firmer in those areas like we've just been doing, and then yeah, just reduce your pressure right down in those other bits. And again, if you've got lots of bits of pencil, don't forget just to use your brush and just gently sweep them away. Now we have obviously got a little bit of that purpley blue, but not quite as much as what was on up here, but I'm just going to use a little bit of that blue violet. I can obviously press firm in this nice dark section, and then here I don't want too much, so I'm just going to use a light pressure just to wash a bit on just in places, just add a bit more of that bluey purple to it, and just softly in that lighter areas. And then thinking about those lighter areas, we're going to continue in the same vein, and I'm going to get the Payne's Grey 30 to go over. Now often we do work from light to dark, but like in areas like these where you just want to kind of go a bit lighter than what you've left it at and kind of just bring it together and smooth it, by using a firm pressure with a lighter colour, you can just soften it off a little bit, and just kind of bring it together. And again, then going even lighter with the white, I'm just going to add a few strands in those lightest places, using a nice firm pressure, not too much, but just. And then if you want to tidy any of those up again, get one of your darker colours. I think I might get my black, and just anywhere you just want it to go slightly darker, then just go back over and tidy that up. Now this edge here, which I've not done an awful lot of, we've obviously got that reddy pinky tones to it again. So I've got my crimson aubergine. There's not too much red in here, but there is a bit, so I'm just going to go from the top of the black a little bit and just a few light bits with a light pressure into that orangey fur on the edge, just to, and it goes up along this bit too a little bit, so just a few light strands. And if you need to go a bit orange, more orangey pink, you've got your burnt sienna. You can always just add a bit of that on that edge too. And then the darker markings, I'm going to get my Payne's Grey 60 to start, I think, and I'm just going to draw a few lines into the orange just where we want it to overlap, and if that's not dark enough, then go for your black or your dark indigo. In fact, I might go dark indigo. I'm just going to draw a couple of final hairs, kind of just overlapping, not pressing too hard, and just overlapping. And if they're not subtle enough, remember you can get the lighter colour next to it. So I've got the brown ochre, and I'm just going to carefully just over those tips just wash a little bit just to soften them, just right on the ends, soften them off a little bit so they're just not quite so prominent. And then I'm also going to use that just in that bit here that I'd missed earlier, where the orange fur is coming down a little bit, and just to bring that in. And again, that is actually, if you look, that is a bit more reddy there, so you can always get your reddy brown. I actually might use a bit of my raw umber or my crimson aubergine, just to bring it down a little bit into that middle section, just there. Just a few tweaks going into that lighter bit. And there we have some fairly realistic looking fur. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say is obviously you've got your Tombow Mono Eraser again, so if you've gone too dark and you're struggling to get it lighter, you can always just stroke a few little hairs out with your Tombow just to lighten slightly. Obviously never go white because we've got very dark colours, but if you just need to lift a few strands of hair, obviously make sure it's clean. You can always then just lift a little bit, drawing. I don't think of it as erasing so much as lifting to draw with your it's just like a lifting pencil really, just to lift out any final bits and tweak them as need be. So just like that, you can always just lift a little bit just to lighten. So before I start working on this white area of hair here, we've obviously put in that side to help us with the working out our tonal values, but also just before I move on to that bit, I just want to put in a little bit of this more orangey brown hair here, just to really help gauge how many other colours and how dark we want to put them within the white section of hair. So the first thing I'm going to do is, obviously in the same way as we did over here, I'm going to look at what the lightest kind of colours are within this section here. Obviously we have got some white on the edges, which I'm mindful of, and a few lighter bits in here. So I think what I'm going to do first of all is make sure that my white is actually clean, because I can see it's a bit dirty at the end at the moment. So let's just always make sure you wipe it on a bit of paper or a bit of blue tack, get a nice clean point. So what I'm going to do first of all is not in the white section itself, but in this like browner section, I'm just going to soften the edges slightly, because obviously we will be working with light colours here, and I'm just going to, at the medium pressure, I'm just going to draw in a few white bits, just like kind of in this lightest section of the orange, and just a few strands here. Now if we're not pressing with a really firm pressure, it will pick up the colour, but if we need to lift any out, it will just really help having that underneath. So I'm then going to put down my brown ochre 10%, just in the same way as I did before, and I'm just going to very gently wash over that in this section, using a very light pressure to start with. I don't want hard edges going into the white, so I'm just going to stroke a few strands at the edges there, and I'm going to come right up to that dark marking, obviously, and I'm just going to soften that bit off there as well, and down the side, and then I can just literally just plan in anywhere where it needs to be, and just washing it in the direction of that hair growth. Now I'm not going to go all the way down, I'm just going to go down to this bottom of this white sections, just a little bit there. And it's just a very loose, scribbly kind of a wash. Just to kind of plot it in really where we're going to pop it. So having done that and kind of got that base coat down, I just want to add a tiny bit of pink into it. So I've got that burnt sienna 10%, because particularly on this bottom edge here, and that is what I don't want too much, so I'm just going to add just a little bit kind of in this bottom section here, and just stroke a little bit on with a light pressure and a sharp pencil, and then just a few strands elsewhere, but I'm not completely going to cover it, just a bit up the side. And as you can see, it really is light pressure. Before moving on to then we're going to build up that orangey brown, so I'm going to now get the brown ochre 50%, so a little bit more intensity in colour, and I'm going to just stroke on in places, not all over, because I obviously want that some of that lighter hair to be showing through, but you can start to see there are areas here underneath that dark section where we have a little bit more intensity of colour going on, and then it gets fainter as it comes towards the white, so use a lighter pressure to fade it out. Having kind of got those base coats down, this is also a good opportunity just to wash in where that dark marking is. So I've got my Payne's Grey 60 again. I'm just going to soften that pencil line out a little bit, and I'm just going to carefully just plot in where I kind of want that to be. Remember not to make it too big, best is to go a bit smaller, and then you can always extend it if needs be. So just plot that area in, just in a medium pressure. You needn't press too hard. And then I'm just going to get my dark indigo and just put over the top of it. Now there's quite a lot of readiness on the edge of these as well, that ready purple, just like we had before. So medium pressure just with that dark indigo, and then I'm going to use a spot of black. Again, medium to firm pressure. Now we've got a few layers on. You don't necessarily need loads and loads of layers to get the intensity. If it's a solid colour, just firm pressure and a few colours, you can do it. Now I said I could see that kind of purple element to it, so just in the same way as we did it before, I'm going to get the blue violet, and I'm just going to use a nice medium to firm pressure, probably a bit firmer now, and I'm just going to wash over the top with that, and that's kind of got the darkest down. Now the edges, will build that up as we build the colour next to it. So I'm just going to stop there for a moment with that one and just go back to building up that orange again. Now we've got like that dark in, we can really see how light that is looking. So I'm going to get my brown ochre this time, moving up those colours, and as you can see, this is quite a bright colour, probably a bit brighter than we need in a way. We will tone it down in places, but if we have a little bit of this in here, it'll just help to lift it a little bit. And you can see there are a few strands in places, and where you're going around the dark, just be careful not to drag too much of that in at this point. And then just lightly soften your pencil marks as you kind of go out into this whiter area and make it quite patchy there. There's a few sort of darker strands and then lots of white, and then just come down, not so much here, just a tiny bit, go paler on the bottom as it were. It's just here that you've got a few darker, more intense strands going on. Now I'm going to then move over to that raw umber, which is more of a brown, and I'm just going to be careful with this because it is a darker colour, but I'm just in those darkest areas to start with. Just put some of that down, and then just a few strands with a very light pressure. You can put a bit more around there where it's darker. And then in that lighter, you need to be barely stroking the paper, just a few little snippets in those areas. And now as we come down here, it is starting to get a bit browner in terms of tone and colour, sort of mid-tone browner colour. I mean, there is some more pinky going in there, so we can add that in as well, which I will take the opportunity to do now actually with the burnt sienna 50%, that nice sort of pink colour. I'm just going to very lightly stroke some of that on, starting in this bottom section, and we have got some just lightly going around that whiter bit here up into the more orangey fur. By overlaying and doing these little kind of lines, you'll get the other colours showing through underneath, which is what gives it its effect really. And then in those kind of darker bits coming out of the black marking, we've got a few bits here we will need to darken up, but I'm going to add a bit of that underneath and up around here next to that darker marking, and then just very lightly add a few bits into here. And now that darker marking, I think I might actually try using a bit of sepia there, because it's not black and there is a red tinge to it, which we'll put on, but I think I'm just going to use a light pressure and just try the sepia, and yeah, I think that should work. And then we can add the reddy tinge on in a minute, but there's a few just little darker bits, not too many, but just towards that dark marking, but it's not dark in the sense of being quite so black, but just there is a few little snippets you can just add in, those tiny little bits, just a little bit. Don't need to be too precious about them, but there is some just little darker bits, and at the bottom here. Now I'm just going to reshape that darker bit here, and have a little bit of that brown coming out. Now where we've got that brown, I said obviously I can see it's that purpley red. I'm just going to pop in a little bit of the dark indigo, just very lightly, in the particularly darkest bit, just there, not too much, like I said. And if you need to reshape your dark marking a little bit, if it's not quite right, the edges, then do take the opportunity to do that as well. And then I'm going to get my crimson aubergine on those more reddy purple markings, and because we use the dark indigo as well, it's got that hint of blue in it, which will just go well with that red we're popping down now. I'm also going to just add a few tiny little short, remember it's looking at the length of the hair as well. The hair here is very short, so I'm just putting a few short marks just in that area a little bit. It's also okay if you add a bit of red over the dark marking, particularly around the edges, just to soften it in, blend it in slightly into the other area. Now I'm going to go back into that orange, and I'm actually going to take my brown ochre 50% again, and I'm just going to add a bit more just to build up those layers, blend some of those underneath colours together a little bit. Leave the very lightest bits coming through, obviously. And then, yeah, just repeat the colours. So if you feel like it's a bit too orange and it needs to be a bit pinker, then use the burnt sienna set 10%, just to get a bit more of that softer pink going on here, and blend it in a little bit. And if you need it a bit more orangey, like at the top around here, I've got my burnt ochre 50%, and just around the darker markings where it is a little bit more intense, the colour, you can just add a little bit on in those areas. What I will note as well is this bit here that's going in has got some grey in it, so I've just got my Payne's grey 60%, and I've got a slightly rounder tip, just to get a few softer lines, just blending in on that edge a little bit more, and come up, use a very light pressure and just put the odd little bit into the orange where it's kind of transitioning between the different areas. And if there's anything else that you need to look at lights, darks. I might just add a little bit of raw umber, actually, just a few strands, just to help the lighter bits stand out a little bit more. Not too much, and just any edges that need around that dark bit, and then just sweep away any loose bits. The other thing is, if you find it needs to be a bit pinker in places that's more than the lightest, just go up a percentage and use the burnt sienna 50% if you just need any slightly darker, pinker bits, like around this bottom area here particularly, or around the dark marking. It's a bit of a weird one because it does go lighter here. If you need to blend any of those lighter areas together, get your brown ochre 10% and just smooth over the kind of that lighter section up into the white with a few strands just on the edges. That will just soften it off. And there's also just a tiny bit there I'm just going to leave, which I'll build up in a minute, but that will just, and again into this light on the edges here, if you need to soften off any of those edges a little bit. This nice light colour, good for blending the underneath colours together as well. And by using those short kind of choppy marks, we get this short hair mixed up effect, as it were, going on. Okay, so moving on, working my way around this top section, I'm going to kind of look at this patch here and this patch here. Now you can see obviously within this white there, it's not all just bright white. Yes, there is some brighter white at the top, but if you look really carefully you will see there is some grey tones, there is some more of this orangey yellow tones, some pink tones even in here, the bluey grey. There's lots that is going on. It is not just white, and obviously if we just left it white it would look very flat and very boring. Now the first thing we are going to do though is those really white areas is we're just going to mark them in. Basically I want to make sure I keep them white, and so also that make it easier to lift them out if I lose them. So I'm going to start by stroking on, using a firm pressure first of all, these really white bits up here. Now the hair is longer up here than it is down here, so therefore I need to do longer strokes at the top and shorter strokes at the bottom. So I'm going to start working my way out on this white bit. Now where it's not quite so white, I'm just going to use the medium pressure and I'm going to do some nice strokes overlapping each other, and as we work our way up I'm going to press a little bit firmer to make, as you can see I'm pressed too firm again, never mind, that'll still be alright to do this, and I'm going to overlap those white hairs. Now if you look at it at an angle, you'll see, if I do this on mine I can see myself where I have put those white strokes, and in a moment when I wash over it you will see as well where they are. So I'm just going in the direction, just stroking the hair on as we did before. Now as we come up into this dark area here I'm just going to lighten that pencil mark. I want to get a few of those longer strands in here, so I'm going to use a nice firm pressure, and I'm going to make sure we've got some overlapping each other. I don't want them uniform, and I'm just going to take my time and just have a few going into the dark, not too much, but that will just help to keep that area a bit tidier and cleaner. The other thing is I've got the start here of a whisker going up there, so, and it's white this end, so I'm just going to put that in through there. Now as we work our way down here, I'm just going to sharpen my pencil again, just a tiny bit, not too much, and it's not so white here and the hairs are starting to get a medium length, shall we say. So I'm going to use a medium pressure here just so that they don't stay completely white, and I'm going to just start stroking some on down into this section, looking at how they're positioned, and in this whiter bit here I'm just going to press a little bit firmer, and now we've got really nice short strokes going on here. And if you overlap into the colour that's okay here, because we have got those white specks kind of going in across them, so, and the same down into the dark. Just watch your pencil getting dirty, just make sure you keep it clean if you're going into the dark strands, because otherwise you'll end up putting the black and grey where you don't actually mean to put black and grey. So I've just put a few bits down into there and just the odd bit into here. So I'm just going to concentrate on that bit first. Now, having put the light down, I will come to the dark in a moment, but before I do that, I'm just going to get my burnt sienna 10%, because if you look here, there is bits of pink going on within the white, and it's a nice light kind of muted pinky tone. So I'm going to get my pencil and try and hold it a bit more on the side rather than upright, so that we can gently stroke. I'm not going to wash the whole thing necessarily, but just start stroking on a few hairs, especially coming out of that darker area here. And because we're pressing lightly and going over that nice white, you should start to see more of a hair texture beginning to take shape, and you'll see the odd bit of pink coming through the white. If you want it a little pinker, like towards this middle section, then just do a few layers, again not pressing too hard, because otherwise you will cover up the white completely, and then reduce the length of your pencil strokes as you come down. Now I don't want to cover all of it, like we said, it is pinky towards the top. There are some pinky elements going on in here, so just going to stroke a few on in places in that section, and it is a bit more pinky there, so I'm just going to put an extra layer or two into that bit here, and coming out of the darker area, and there's a little bit going up towards there. If we're using this light colour over here, even around this, coming out this black, you can now start to see where the white is actually going. I've now got my brown ochre 50%, and I'm just going to add just a little bit up here, again using a very light pressure, just around the dark markings that we're going to put in here. You can see there's an element of that kind of orangey brown hair just coming through, just ever so slightly on some of these edges. So I don't want to put too much in, just very softly. And the same here, there's a few specks of hair mixed in with the edge of the white there where it's overlapping. I'm just in there, so I'm just going to add a little tiny bits, and then just a few speckles, not too many, just in this section as we come down here. So we've done pink, we've done that kind of orangey brown colour. Now I want to get a little bit of the grey in there maybe, or a grey tone. I'm actually going to go with the sepia 10%. It's like a pinky grey, which I can definitely see tinges of, particularly in this area, and will work for some of this bit here. So I'm just going to start at the top, and just where it's a little bit darker on this edge coming out here, I'm just going to again just stroke a few strands on here just to darken that bit up, and then coming down into this middle section here, and we've got a bit here, and then there's patches of it, so not all over, but just some patches. And then within the dark bit here, in the light bit, sorry, I'm getting confused. Within the light bit here, I'm just going to stroke a few bits, particularly as we come towards the left of the eye here, where it's coming from the dark area. I'm just going to not go too far, because obviously I've not put white down all over there yet, but stroke some on to get that hair effect. Now, so I can gauge just how white this bit is and what else I do need to put into it. I'm going to just mark in that dark marking, and I'm going to use my Payne's Grey 60% again, but I'm just going to give it a sharpen. Make sure I've got a nice, oh, I've just broken it, hang on. I want a nice sharp tip for the simple reason that I just want to carefully mark in around some of those whites that we've put down that I can just about see from the other colour we've put on top. So I'm just conscious there's obviously a few little bits of dark, and if you go gently, hopefully you won't go over the lightest bits that are going on in here. It's just a few little bits that are happening in different places, so just work out the position carefully before you do anything else around those. And if you go gently, you will feel your way around the very light hairs that we wanted to keep in. And as soon as you found it, then you can avoid them and work around them and keep them nice and tidy. And remember, don't go too big. I'm going to keep inside that line slightly on the other side, for the simple reason that when I start doing my flicks out into the white, then I'll end up getting too big again. So I'm just going to come slightly smaller to start with. And again, just go steady on this edge. It's nice white. If you pressed firm enough on those white hairs, you shouldn't have too much of a problem trying to keep them fairly clean. And just, yeah, work out where the edges go, not only by following your pencil lines that you've got down, but obviously keep checking your reference photo as well, because it's easy to lose your pencil lines or to lose your way, as it were. And I've just kind of done a wash. I've not been pressing too hard, just a light to medium pressure really, and then you can always just go back over and start thinking about where those dark areas actually are. Particularly when you've worked out the white bits that you want to kind of start avoiding. And then just sweep away any loose hairs, but just simply even by doing that, and it's not even as dark as I'm going to go, it really lifts the highlight on this area, because I thought, oh, it's looking quite dark. Actually, it's not. So what I'm going to do is just continue to darken that up a little bit in the same way as we've done with the others. So I shall go for the dark indigo next with that blue tinge in it, and again I'm going to keep it a bit smaller than I necessarily I'm going to have it at the end, just so I don't end up going way over, because I can see myself doing that. I can always go in at the end and put in the final details with the longer bits that are protruding over the white fur. Now my pencil is getting a bit round, so little sharpen just round these bits so I can keep those bits nice and tidy. Around here. As best as I can. That's it. And then following on from that one, I'm going to do the black. Again, I need to just give it a sharpen. As we've been using all these pencils, they've obviously become blunt. So using a nice sort of medium to firm pressure in the darkest areas, just start filling up the tooth of that paper, but just go really steady around any lighter bits or any of those white hairs that you want to keep. Make it easier in the long run. Again, it's not quite so dark at this end in places, so just go steady because we can add a bit more brown in there. What I have noticed as well is obviously those purpley tones and pinky tones that are going on. So I've got my blue violet, and I'm just going to put a bit of that over as well. Just a medium pressure, not too hard. I don't want too much of this. And again, just watch that top bit, because we'll go brown rather than purple. But what I am going to do is on this section here, particularly as I haven't extended it, I'm just going to go out slightly using my burnt sienna 50%, so a mid-tone, and I'm just going to start to just draw a few hairs coming out just slightly in that area, just so I don't forget when I come to do the next section that I want to consider that. So having put that down, and I think I might actually get the crimson aubergine as well and just do a little bit of that into there, not too much, but just a little bit towards that edge, followed back by the blue violet we had. Again, just a few strands starting to come out now, just a little bit. And then finished with the black, just a few strands, not too much, just to kind of finish it off a little bit. But it is going to be grey, and we'll finalise that edge and what's going on in just a moment when we move on. For now, let's just focus on this area here. So as we said, the top bit here is a bit more of brown going on, just a little bit, in between the white hairs. So I've got my brown ochre, and I'm just going to, in between those, the really whitest ones, I'm just going to add a touch of that, and it is on some of those lighter strands of hair, not all over them. Some of them are white, but just wash some of that on in that section, and down there's a little bit in here as well. And coming down into this bit down at the bottom, coming out of the black, just add a little bit on that edge. Now, what I will say is that obviously we've still got quite a big blob of white, really, and we might need to soften some edges around here. So I've got my sepia 10%, so that's sort of pinky grey, and I'm just going to kind of add a few bits in from this, particularly on the left side a bit more. I can softly go over the white, and some of these the whites, just see if they're all completely white or whether some of it's pushed back a little bit with a bit of grey. You can tone tone them down a bit. And again, how far those edges come in. Now I need a bit more pink for my liking, so I'm going to get the burnt sienna, 10%. I'm just going to put a few, just little bits, and also a bit of the bluey grey, so the Payne's Grey 30, just very lightly, because that obviously is a stronger colour. I'm just going to put a few lines, particularly towards those edge there where we want it just a little bit darker near the black, and towards the bottom where it's blending into the orangey hair. And again, if you need to go in and tidy up any of those edges, just add a bit of it into some of the white bits there, not all over the white. Keep some bits white, and then there's the odd darker bit just in there, which will make the white pop out a bit more. Now what we can do as well, if you want to lift out any of that white, is to use your Tombow. Here's mine. Make sure it's clean first. You can use the Tombow and make sure you've got a nice flat sort of edge, so you can get a fine edge on it. Instead of erasing with it like pushed down like that, get it more on the side, so you get just the edge of the eraser, and you can just carefully run along, like imagining it's a hair, and just lightly, you don't need to press hard, just lift, particularly if it's got that white underneath that we put down earlier. It will really make it easier to lift off where you do that, so you can just get those odd bits of hair, and just so we get a few lighter bits. Make sure you keep your eraser clean as well, and make sure you just keep sweeping away any loose bits. But yeah, just where it's white, particularly more at the top, and any bits coming in here, if you need to just lighten any of those off, then you can use the Tombow for that as well. Just a little bit here, I think, because I think I've gone a bit darker there, but not too much. And then and if you find you get any bits of eraser stuck to the paper sometimes with this, just gently, you can just gently lift them off by just running the Tombow over, and it will lift them off nice and cleanly for you. And again, coming down into this bottom bit here, even if you want a few whiter bits where it's just a bit whiter here, then just run the Tombow just to lift out a few bits a bit more. What I would say is perhaps to make this light stand out a bit, this bit here might need a little bit more adding to it, and there's actually a purpley brown in there, so I'm actually going to get my light aubergine we've not used for a little while, but I think that'd be a really good colour just to add a few tweaks of hair into this section, this nice sort of browny purple colour. It'll just, anywhere that needs that kind of brown, the hint of purple in it, and it will also just lift that white out a little bit more. There's a few bits in there, and again, maybe even just on this edge, just a couple of bits coming out of that darker area there, or if you just need any edges. And yeah, that's starting to come together now. If you need to tidy up any of the white hairs as well after the Tombow, then just make sure your white pencil is clean, and you can just apply a bit more, just run over it. And again, yeah, I'm just gonna, anytime I've gone near dark, I just want to make sure the tip is nice and clean for me, so I don't spread any hairs where they shouldn't be spread. Any of that dark. And again, if you need to tidy any up, then just get one of your darker colours like the black or the dark indigo, and you can just tidy up around those fine hairs. If they're too fat, you can always just make them a little bit thinner and a bit tidier. Be careful not just to draw a solid line all the way around them, obviously, when you do this, or with any hairs and any colour. You don't just want to end up with a solid line. Do be careful. But and again, I'm just going to look over here and make sure I've got that shaped. It's blending out a bit more at the top, so I'm just going to softly apply a bit there and just check the shape around here if there's any little strokes that I need to pop on. And that's pretty much coming together now. I think just one final thing is I'm going to get that brown ochre again, and I'm just going to add just a tiny bit. Now I've tidied that up in that section there, and I think I'm just tidy up the edge here where on that orangey bit with a few random little strokes just to intensify the colour slightly, and that's done. Okay, so I'm going to start looking now at the next section. So I'm going to look at this bit here above the eye and then up into the white and the dark bit next to it. Just by working just in small sections makes it a little less overwhelming. If you look at this as a whole and think, oh my goodness me, it's you know, it can be quite overwhelming. You've got hairs going everywhere, you've got the whiskers, and it just all becomes a bit complicated. So by breaking it down just into small sections makes it a little bit more manageable. So I'm going to start, we kind of got up to this point here, so I'm just going to start looking at this bit in the same way. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my white, and I'm going to put in some of those really lighter hairs, and I'm going to use, it's not white, so I'm just going to use a medium pressure rather than a firm pressure, just to help keep some light. Now if your pencil does end up with a bit of black on, don't forget to give it a clean. When we look at this section here, some of this dark needs to go a bit wider even from earlier, so we do need to have a look at that as well, and just look at the length of those hairs. They're starting to get a little bit longer than they were down here, so just keep that in mind. But I'm just, before I go up into that section, I'm just going to look at this little bit first, because having got some white down, I actually just want to go back and re-look and make sure on my outline in this darker bit, because I don't think I've got it wide enough in truth. So I'm just going to have a look and just use this Payne's Grace 60 just to start thinking about making it a bit fatter. And just, yeah, where it's going to go really. Let's see, because we've got that dark bit coming up here, so and there is more going on, so I just need to be a bit wider here. Now having put that in, I'm just going to get my black and just go over that a little bit, just where I'm kind of widening it a little bit. use a firm pressure just to obviously make sure you are in the right place. Easier to put in than it is to take out, as it were. So it's better. Right. So having kind of put that in, and you obviously can go in with the dark indigo as well. Get a bit of blue on if you need to on that edge, just to tidy it up a little bit. Excuse me. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of start building up the pinks and the greys and purpley tones within this area here. I'm going to start with my Payne's grey, the bluer grey, and particularly coming out of this bit here is a bit more bluey in tone. So I'm going from the dark to the light, and just stroking some on in this area, again in the direction that the hair is growing. And if you're using a light pressure as well, obviously it will go over the white we put down earlier. And just below this black bit here is a bit more, it is a bit more darker, so I'm going to put a little bit here going up into that white section, but I'm not going to go right up into that because I want to look at the whiskers first. But there is definitely a bit more around there, and can add a bit more into this just here, but yeah, mainly around softening that dark edge into it a bit more and just blending it out a little bit. Now I'm then going to go towards more of the purpley browny kind of grey, the sepia 10%, and I'm going to just do the same thing and add some strands in where we're blending it in a little bit more from that darker colour. And then just add a few strands over that white area, and particularly in that darker section under that black mark, and just as we're coming towards the white. Again, allow some of that white pencil we put down to obviously show through by using a light pressure. Again, you can always soften some of that dark edge by going over it if needs be. And now thinking of that dark edge there, and what we've got coming out, I'm going to actually use the light aubergine, and I'm just going to just a tiny bit on the edge around here, and just ever so tiny bit underneath this dark one here, coming down and above the black. Gives a bit more variation. Now this darker area here coming out, it's a browny black, so I'm actually going to get my sepia, and I'm just going to add on this bit here above the tear duct, just going to add a few light pressured strands into this area just there. And again coming down just from that one. Now obviously it has that more of a purple tone, but light. It's not bright purple, it's more of a violet grey, which is exactly what I'm going to get out, my violet grey, and just add a few strands just next to this dark bit and down here, because this bit is a bit more shadowed just here, so there is a bit more of that purple grey element going on, say up here. So just stroke a bit on and it will go over the underneath colours, and then the grey, I'm going to get my Payne's Grey 60, and any if you just want to tidy up any little lines just above the dark, just to tidy up slightly, then do feel free. And the shape, just consider the shaping of the dark areas here. We got it out right. Now I can also just think about those final kind of hairs in that area that are overlapping. Some are dark grey, some of them are going to be the black. Not too hard, I'm just doing it gently because they're not too prominent in this bit. And if you go too much, you can always push them back with a lighter colour like the Payne's Grey 30 or a bit of white, just if you want to push any of them back in slightly so they're just not quite so bright in your face. And the same principle, if you need to lift out any white, then make sure your Tombo's clean, and you can always just stroke it just a tiny bit, just to, you need to lift out any areas. And again, make sure you keep it clean regularly as well. I'm just going to take mine back a bit whiter here actually, and just a tiny bit here, make it a bit whiter, lighten it slightly. There we are, and that's pretty much it. Just make sure you give it a little sweep. Now we can start thinking about the white and dark bit here. Now the thing here is the fact that we've got these whiskers, and you think trying to work around them can be quite tricky. Trying to put them in afterwards can be quite tricky, because it's all right with the dark, but if you're then trying to get the light bit nice and clean on, that can be quite a challenge. Now what I am going to do is, they're not completely white, the whiskers. If you look here, they're not like a bright clear white. So I'm actually going to start by very lightly using a sepia 10% to work out where I want them to go. Now, obviously I don't want to get the pencil stuck underneath. I'm going to start with the top one, and I'm just going to roughly work out where I want to position it. Remember, if you haven't got it within a few millimetres, don't panic. Whiskers move. As long as you've kind of got the general shape of where it's going, then you're okay. So I'm just going to very lightly, to start with, this is the sepia 10%, I'm just going to work out where I want it, and I know I want it curved and round to make it more natural looking, and it's fatter at the end that it came out. So I can press just slightly firmer there to get a slightly wider line as it tapers out. It's also not, it's got some grey in it, like the bluey grey. So I've got my Payne's Grey 30, and I'm just going to go over the top with a very light pressure, particularly at this, towards this end where it's a bit darker, and fade it out as I go along. And then I'm going to get my Payne's Grey 60, because this end is obviously darker still, and I'm just very light pressure going to put a bit coming out of that dark and then onto there and just fade it out. And then what I'm going to do to protect it is I'm going to get my white. Now I need to make sure it's fairly sharp, but try not to snap it, which I have a habit of doing. And I'm going to make sure it's fairly sharp, and I'm going to make sure it's nice and clean. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press using a firm pressure, and I'm going to concentrate, and I'm going to go over the top and make sure I stay over the top, not elsewhere. And I'm going to go cover that over with the white. Now, having used a firm pressure, that should help to keep it clean, but because we've got the colour underneath, it's obviously not completely white. And hopefully that should work, and also means we can see it, so we can kind of work around it a little bit as well to make our lives a little bit easier. But that's kind of got that positioned in. So that's one. So let's now try and put in another one. So I'm going to use the same thing again, the sepia 10%. I'm just going to lighten some of this pencil lines here so they don't get stuck underneath. But the second one, I'm going to work out where it's coming from about here. Now it's got a curve again, so I'm just doing it above the paper just so I can see. Curve here, and it comes down to about here. So, okay, so I'm going to lightly, very light pressure. And it's got a curve, so I need to make sure I go up. And then it's going to curve down here. Yeah, that'll do roughly. Now it's got, obviously where it comes out, it's a little bit wider, so I can just press just marginally firmer here and then just blend it out as I come along. And it is quite light along this edge, so I don't want to go too much. Then I'm going to get the Payne's Grey 30, because obviously it's not quite that pink all along. And I'll start this end, and I'm going to use a light pressure, and I'm just going to wash it over there and get softer and softer as I go along. And it's on that curve, so just soften it out, not right to the end. And then the same getting a bit darker with the Payne's Grey 60, because it is quite dark at this end. And I'm just going to gently wash on this end here and fade it out as I go along. And it's actually quite dark there, so I'm actually going to go even further this time. Get the dark indigo just a little bit, just right on the end. Just there. Now I'm going to get the white, make sure it's nice and clean, fairly sharp, and I'm going to carefully, using firm pressure, go along here to try and keep it clean and just clean it off. And then we've got one more to do, so exactly the same thing, sepia 10%. Now this one's got a weird curve on it, so I'm going to just sort of plot it in my head first, so it's going up, then it's going to curve down and up here. Okay, so it starts about here, and just plot it in very lightly, because then if you go in the wrong place you can always go over the top of it or erase it off. And then we're going to just go up here. So I may have come slightly wider than that black, but it's okay. As long as they look realistic, we're okay. So then I'm going to get the Payne's Grey 30, and again it's just a bit more grey on this end here, and also slightly wider where it's coming out. But I'm not going to go too far along, it's quite a lot lighter, this one. So just there, and the Payne's Grey 60 just on the end. Don't need too much of this one, it's not quite so dark. And then I'm just going to get the white and go over it again, just to firm pressure. Just to try and protect it a little bit. Okay, well that makes it a bit easier. So now what we can do is look at this white section here. Now we've kind of got that a bit more protected, and obviously it's lighter at the top than it is at the bottom. So I'm going to stroke some hairs on carefully, And I'm going to start at the bottom. I'm not trying to go particularly over the line we've got, but if we do, it should be protected. So I'm going to use just a medium pressure to stroke some hairs on here into that darker section that we've got kind of going on. And then in the top bit I'm going to press firmer because let me just get rid of that line because obviously it's quite white and I want to keep the paper clean. So I'm just going to press quite firm, get my hairs on there, and like I said, not quite so many or quite so much there. But like if you happen to accidentally go over the line, it should be protected, so we're okay. So, excuse me, having done that, I'm just going to get, it is quite purpley this bit here, so I'm actually going to use the violet grey to start with, and just very gently I'm going to stroke in the direction of the hair. And it's okay if it's quite dark here anyway, it's okay to go over those lines. Helps it make a bit of a smoother stroke than having to stop, try and draw your way around it, which can be very off-putting and quite tricky. And then you've got a slightly darker bit around the edge of that dark area there, so I'm just going to put a little bit more just on there, not too much. And also there's a little bit more of a brown going on there, so I'm going to get my brown ochre just on the edge here where between the dark and the light. I'm just going to add just a tiny bit on that edge coming in. Now what we do need to do now is obviously mark in that dark area, and what I am going to do though before I do that is on the other side of it here there are just a few hairs that are poking into that dark area, so I am just going to draw a couple on with my white just simply on that edge so I don't accidentally get carried away and lose it. And I can get my Payne's grey 60%, and then I can just gently work out where I want to wash it. Now because we are doing a wash, we can just work around those whiskers a little bit more easily because we can see them quite clearly, and then just stroke out into the further, so we've got some nice strokes. And just watch those edges, work around those whiskers again there. It's quite dark in that bit. This is the bit you do need to take your time on. And just work away around that whisker, and then you can stroke on into the darker bits. It's a bit lighter on the edge, there are a couple of lighter hairs, so hopefully you should be able to keep your whiskers fairly tidy. If it goes wrong, we'll talk about that in a minute, don't worry. These things happen. Now it's also a good time here, I can just take a few of the darker, there's a couple of darker strands coming out of that black on the right, so I can just draw those in a few while I've got that pencil out. Not too many, otherwise it'll cover the whole thing, but just a few. Now in that dark section, obviously I'm just following the same procedure that I did before really. I'm going to get my dark indigo, and again be really careful to work around those whiskers if you can help it, and then just put this in the real darkest sections. Remember here there is some of the lighter hair showing through in places, so it's not completely solid. Don't make it too wide again. You can always come back and add in some final hairs, as it were, later on. So we've done that. Now we can get our black. Just go in those darkest areas with that. And then obviously I can see some purple in there. So I'm going to get that blue violet and just add a little bit of that on as well. Remember not to get too big with the marking, but that's pretty darkened it up. And then on the edges we have got just that little bit of brown, so I'm just going to use my brown ochre just right on, blending those edges a little bit just as we come down. I can go over the top slightly of the dark and just not too much, but you can just add a little bit in. And I'm going to finish by adding a bit of the pink burnt sienna 10 just to blend it in just on that edge there. And also on these edges here where it's overlapping, we haven't got lots of really white ones on here. They're a bit more pinky in tone, so I can push them back just a little bit on that edge. And we will come and do the whiskers as a whole in a minute once we've covered all of this area here, but they're not looking too bad. That has worked quite well. Okay, so I'm going to move on to looking at the next section. We've got some white bits here and obviously above the eye, so I'm going to start by just putting those in with my white pencil. So again, just like we did in the other places, on the whitest bits use a firm pressure. Also I need my rubber. Let me just remove some of those pencil marks a little bit just so they don't get stuck underneath. So use a firm pressure for the really white ones. You want to definitely keep particularly on the edge into the dark markings as well, and then you can just add some with the medium pressure where it's not quite so white, where there's a bit more grey in here. And again, remember, if you tilt your lighting, you will probably be able to see where you're actually popping the white down to give yourself an idea of how much you've actually put on. The important thing to remember as well is the length of your strokes. So it's getting longer as kind of we come around this area here, and make sure it's curving around the eye socket. So I'm thinking of it in a 3D shape. It's not flat, although obviously the photograph makes it look flat. We're trying to create that 3D effect. So, and just remember here, the white's not going all the way up to the black, so I'm not going to go that far because it's obviously got lighter orangey area there as well. So we've got the black area here, so I don't want to completely lose that, but just soften the edge slightly. And then we've got quite a lot of white, bright white in this area here, so press with a fairly firm pressure on that bit. Make sure you do your flicks at the end so you've got that tapered off effect as well. So just thinking about my edge here with my dark, so I've just got a couple of lighter bits going up, not too many, and then I'm just going to sweep that away. I'm just going to pop some up in this white area here, and I'm going to do this carefully because we've got a few particular strands that are kind of just going over into that dark, so I can pop those in carefully. And although my pencil snapped, I've still got a sharp edge on it that I can use. Quite a firm pressure, and if it's okay to go over the whiskers, because we put a nice firm pressure over that, so that should stay as it is, which makes it a little bit easier when trying to wash the colours on. So yeah, I'm just tilting my head just to have a little look at where I've been putting and if I need to add any more. Again, just if you get any black on your pencil, remember just to wipe it off as well. So having got that down, I'm just going to get my, I think I'm going to actually just gently mark in where my dark markings are first, just to make my life a little bit easier so I don't lose my way. So I've got my Payne's Grey 60 and I'm just going to give it a sharpen. That's better. Nice sharp pencil. And I'm just going to work out carefully using a light pressure so I don't go over those nice white bits that we've put down, but I'm just going to kind of work out roughly where I want it up to, because obviously I've taken out some of those pencil lines, and it's obviously quite easy to lose what you're doing, as it were. So I'm just gonna just gently plot that back in a bit. Don't need to do all of it, just as long as I've got a bit of an idea as to where I'm going with it, then that will really help. So I'm just doing a very light pressure on this top bit up here, because that actually is quite light and I'm not too worried about that section at the moment. I'm just trying to focus on this bottom white bit, but just if I just put a few strands in here just to help me so I don't lose my little way, as it were. I've got a bit coming down here. And you can kind of see where those whiskers are, which makes it a little easier to go around to try and keep them a little bit tidier. And then I've got this marking here, haven't I? So I can just pop in roughly where that's going to go. And again, you can see, because I'm using a really light pressure, it's going over that nice white that we popped down as well. So that's just kind of getting a rough idea of where they're gonna be. I can always obviously extend them out a little bit further as I need to. It's best to go a bit smaller, as we mentioned before, simply because they tend to have a habit of growing as you're laying the colours on. So it's just there we are, just to give us an idea. So what I'm going to do now is build up that shadow in the white a little bit. I think I'm actually going to start with my sepia first, for the simple reason that I can see some purpley grey in here, and obviously this isn't purple, but it's it has got some pinky purpley tones within the grey. So I'm just going to start by stroking that out of this dark area gently, just to start building up a bit of tone within that, and it should go over some of that white as well that we put down. If you just do the strokes in the same way, then it will go in the right direction that we want it to go in. And the same up here as well. I'm just going to lightly put some over this white, particularly it's a bit quite purple there, and just make sure you stroke, even though it was going over the whites in places, keep stroking in the right direction in case you've not pressed hard enough or whatever. It just obviously helps with that illusion of the hair and which way it's growing. Obviously we've got an edge here, so I'm just going to put a bit on that edge of the white. And definitely got some more within this lower section here, so wash a little bit more on there. Also help the white stand out a little bit more if you've got something a bit darker next to it. And growing out of that darker marking that we're going to put in there. Okay, so now that we've got that in, I'm going to get a violet grey, so a bit more purpley tones still. I'm just going to, and a bit darker, I'm just going to add a few darker marks in here and in that top section. Just in the same way really, anywhere there's a few darker bits, but not too dark obviously, just to plot it in. Okay, so I'm going to just plot in as well where some of this orangey fur is just a little bit more, just so we don't lose the edge. So I've just got my brown ochre 10%, so I've got a nice pale colour, and I'm just going to wash it on just a little bit on this side, just to kind of gently go over that bit and hopefully start to see some of the white on that edge a little bit with any luck. There's not too much in that bit, just a tiny bit. It's mainly in here. Just so we can start seeing some of that white coming through just a little bit and around here. Okay, so what I'm going to do now before I I am going to do the dark areas, but just before I do the dark areas, I'm just going to get my Payne's Grey 30%, and if you look carefully in some areas, particularly just above this black of the eye, there is some bluey grey, so I'm just going to gently stroke on a little bit of my Payne's Grey in this area, just to darken it up a little bit, and you'll see some of those white hairs really beginning to stand out a bit now, which is great. what we want, but yeah, just keep it towards this bottom area here on the whole. And then if you look at the bottom of this dark section, which I probably am going to need to bring down a little bit more actually, but it is a bit darker in that area as well. So I'm just going to add a few gentle strokes into that area just to darken it up a bit, and just around that grey bit here there's a little bit more, like so. Now that blacky markings, obviously they're not all completely black. If you look at the top, it's quite a lot lighter at that top bit. Just be mindful of that as we're putting it down. But we've done the Payne's grey, so I'm going to follow the same method that I've done for the other markings, just to keep them the same really. I'm going to go for the dark indigo, and I'm just going to carefully apply some of this over the top, and I can go around because I can see some of those white hairs sticking in, so it makes it a bit easier to kind of work around them a little bit. What I am conscious of is actually, I might just get my Payne's grey for this. I'm just going to lower this darker area just a little bit, because if we look, that should actually come a bit lower than that one. If I'm just looking across, the bottom of it should be that one. We might have come down a bit far actually, but it should be coming down just a little bit more into this area. So I'm just gonna, just on that bottom edge there, that's a bit better, and then I can go over it with my dark indigo and leave some of those white little specks of hair kind of showing through. If they're too long, you can always we can always go over them a little bit at the end and just correct that with a black. That's not a problem. I am just going to sharpen mine though, because the tip's broken slightly, and given we're in such tiny areas and being careful, having a sharp point makes it much easier just to kind of try and go around a few of these light bits of hair to try and keep it as neat and tidy as I can. And I'm just trying to work around those whiskers a little bit as well, just to try and make it a bit easier when we're tidying them up more than anything. And then as I come up the top here, I am going to reduce my pressure down a bit where it's lighter, and I'm just going to lightly stroke on, so like it's a bit dark, a few darker marks, but and then a bit lighter, and then I am just going to tidy up along that whisker there, just to try and neaten it up a little bit. If it's not perfect, don't worry. If you accidentally go on the top of it, don't worry, we will come back to finish tidying it in at the end. But the tidier you can be with it on the way, the easier you'll make your life when we're doing that tidying up. And then yeah, just soften it out a little bit on that top. go really lightly. A few softer bits at the edge. Tidy that up. And I'm also going to apply a little bit to this darker area here. There's quite a lot of purple going on in here as well, so that pinky purple, will add that in too in a moment. But that, and again, I'm just looking at the direction of which way that hair is growing. Okay, so that's starting to give a bit more depth. Like by working that up at the same time, it helps us to gauge how light that white actually is as well. So having done that, I'm now going to apply some black to it. Again, make sure your pencil is sharp. Keep it clean from the debris. And then, yeah, I'm just going to carefully try and work around some of those white little bits of hair. Make sure it's nice and tidy. There's a bit more coming down here, so just looking at the edge a bit more. Just shape those whiskers off a little bit. And then obviously it's not so dark, we want that coming out, so I'm just doing a few strands out so it's not such a harsh transition line between them. But and then, yeah, in the darker places you can use a medium to firmer pressure, but in those lighter places obviously just reduce your pressure down a bit. See, I feel there's a bit of a hard line there. I need to just soften that off and just blend that out a little bit, so that's better. Excuse me. Right, I'm now going to use some of that blue violet on there. Get a bit of that in, and then get in some pink as well. More of the pinky tones. Oh, I've just broken it. Try again. That's a bit better. So it's obviously very dark in this bottom section, so you can use a firmer pressure here. Just watch those white bits. And then there's definitely some purpley tones in the middle section. And then blend it out into that lighter area a little bit. And obviously reduce your pressure down in the lighter section. Now, although we've drawn the line above the whisker, kind of going that way to shape it, just make sure you blend it out that way as well, so you don't end up with a hard line going around the white bits, because otherwise that will look very strange. Okay, so we talked about the pinky colours. I'm actually going to just use a bit of the burnt sienna 50%. There's obviously not lots of pink in here, but there is definitely some on the edges. So just, there's a bit up here, for example. I can just have coming out of that darker area here into the white. And there's definitely some. I'm going to put a little bit in that lighter section in place. It's not all over, just a few strands, and then reduce my pressure right down. And I'm just going to stroke on a bit coming out of that area into that top kind of section. Remember to change the direction of your pencil strokes so that they're overlapping and kind of not all going in the same exactly uniform same direction. And again, around here I said there was some pink, and actually I've forgotten to apply the same colours here as I have here, so I'm just going to stroke a bit of pink coming out of that, and then I need to get out my black and blue and just add a bit into that section as well. And then we have got a bit of that little bit of pinky tones in this bottom area, so I'm just going to add a little bit down in a few places down here, and in the white bit here there's just a few. We'll add there as well. So going back to that dark bit we've just missed, we need to think what we've put down. So we've put down some dark indigo. Just pop a bit of that on, and then some black. I'm just trying to be careful to go around some of those white markings. We can always push them back a little bit in a minute if they're not quite as white. And then some of the blue violet, just a little bit, not too much here. And then I'm going to put a bit more of the pink over the top, that burnt Sienna 50, just to blend it in just a tiny bit, just to start building that area up a little bit. Now what I do want to look at is obviously I do need to add some more into this white here with a few darker bits and make that orange a bit darker. I also need that black. We need to add some highlights into that area, so I'm going to do that first. So I'm going to start with my Payne's Grey 30, and I'm just going to start using a medium to firm pressure. I'm going to start just stroking some of that over between the lighter section and the darker section, and you can have a few strands going over into the darker section there, which will just tone it down a bit in places and kind of just blend the two areas together, and then just a few strands as we come into this section here and on this edge, so you don't end up with too harsh an edge. Now to lighten it down more, I'm going to get my white. Now you may remember we talked about the amount of pressure you apply with the white. You know, if you're not pressing too hard, I'm just going to sharpen that, you'll just start to lighten the colour underneath a little bit, and it's just testing out how much pressure you actually need. So it's always best to go a bit lighter, and then you can apply more pressure and kind of just work out how hard you actually need to be pressing to get some lighter strands of hair in there. And I'm also going to just clean it, because when we've been going over the top it obviously gets a bit dirty, so make sure you leave it clean. But the white strands that we've got going into this white, but I'm just going to take the opportunity just to try and go over some and just tidy them up a little bit. And remember to keep cleaning your pencil, because you will pick up the black around it as well. So I'm just make a start on just tidying them slightly. Keep cleaning. I should just help to blend them in a little bit more. And you can always just run off the end to soften like that end point, as it were, so that you haven't just suddenly got this harsh stopping line, as it were. Now your whiskers as well, you can always just gently just run along those. And just blend in some of that colour that's gone on it, because it's not completely white anyway in places. So, and if you find you need to dull them down a bit more, you know, then you can add a bit of colour over the top. I think I might just get my violet grey, particularly at the end. I'm just on place. I'm just going to add a few bits. So I've got a few brighter bits and then a few darker bits, as it were. And here I could just do with getting my black out and actually just tidying up on that edge slightly. I don't feel it's quite neat enough. Just remember to blend it down a little bit so you don't just have a solid black line going around. You need to obviously blend it out, but it might be easier obviously to twist your paper around so you can make it a bit easier to draw around it. Just take your time. And just, sorry, I'm just concentrating really hard on this bit. You can also, if you put those light, you can always just take the odd darker line up into that light as well, just to help that transition. Right, and then I'm just going to clean that away. I'm just going to push that bit back, it looks a bit weird. There we go, and then that's sort of starting to take shape. Actually, looking here, I could just do with a bit more light curving round, so I'm just going to add a few strands. Just to lighten it off a bit. So I'm going to stop and just have a think. What do I notice? Well, first thing I notice is I need to darken up some of this white area here. There's also some browny colours in that white section, and there's a few bits here, and I think that's going to be my starting point, to be honest. I think I'm going to try the brown ochre, and I don't want too much because it's not that brown, but if you look carefully there is the odd little bit. So I've got a nice sharp pencil. I'm not going to press too hard, but I'm just going to put a couple of strokes in, particularly more towards that edge, just coming out slightly, just a tinge of colour. A few little bits just on edges, and I'm also going to add this colour a bit down here a bit as well, just to darken off around this bottom section just a little bit, not too much, but just, it obviously gets lighter as we go up. We don't need so much here, just a couple of strands coming out of that dark area there. And don't be afraid to stop and actually just stand back and check what you're doing as well. What I do notice, excuse me, is that I could do with some more. These whites into here aren't really all that white in places. It needs to be pushed back a little bit. So I'm going to get my violet grey, because they're a bluey, a purpley grey colour. So I'm going to use my violet grey for that. And I'm just going to gently go over, not all of them, but just some of the ones that need to be pushed back a little bit in places. Just add a bit more, because they're not just solid white lines. And then I'm going to do a few more strokes coming up into that kind of darker area above the eye. And then just to add in a few darker bits still, I'm going to get the Payne's Grey 60, and I'm just going to add just a few, not too much of this, because it is obviously quite a strong colour, but just the odd little stroke just to really darken that. And I'm coming out of the dark area with it, so just anywhere above the eye, really, that dark bit, just adding a few. And also coming out of this dark section here, where it's not quite so black, but there is a few strokes of dark, which leads into the pinky colour on this side here. And obviously it's not a dark pink, it's a lighter pink, so I've got my burnt sienna 10% for this bit, and just I'm going to add just a few strands around the white bits here, because it will help the white bits stand out a bit more, hopefully, as well, give a bit more definition to them where we pressed. And I'm also going to just go over some of that orange up into this area as well, a few strokes, and above the bottom of this bit here is a bit more pinky. Help some of that white stand out a bit more, and coming out of that dark area can soften off those edges a little bit. And that's starting to come together. So now we're kind of getting those tonal values in a little bit more. I'm just going to get my raw umber here, and just where it's a little bit darker in that brown bit just towards the bottom, and coming out of that black area, there's a few sort of browner marks, just a little bit, not too much, but just there's a few in places just where it's kind of overlapping with the black. So I'm just going to add a few of those just to help it stand out a bit more. And then I'm going to get my black, and I'm just going to try and tidy up the edges of this black a little bit in places where I've not got a clean line finished here. I need to just make sure I fill in that. Make sure I fill in that bit, make sure I've not got like a hazy edge when there's not, and then I'm just very, very lightly, I'm barely pressing for some of these, I'm just kind of doing a few of those longer kind of lashes and hairs that are coming off and just make sure I've kind of got that edge as it should be. And now these are kind of going all over the place. So I'm just going round the eye for this and just making sure my edges are correct. Now I also can see a bit of purple in there, so I'm actually going to get my blue violet out, and I'm just going to run just a little bit in places, a few strokes, just to kind of get that tinge of that violet, not too much. It's just like a little tinge to it. Now if any of your edges are those that are obviously too much, then you know we can always just push them back a bit with a lighter grey over the top, just to soften the ends a little bit if you need to. And I've just got my violet, my Payne's grey, just to add a few bits on that kind of edge to soften it, that dark into the light a little bit more, and add a few bits in here. Just very light pressure I'm using, I'm not pressing too hard. Also just thinking of that black coming down here, it's not completely black, it's a bit more grey, so I can just soften off the edges if I need to. Now what I would say is I need to lift a little bit of white out. I've lost a little bit on the way, so I'm going to get my Tombow, and I'm just going to carefully remember use like a side edge, and I'm just going to run it over some of those white lines that we popped in. Remember to keep it clean by just wiping it on the side on a spare bit of paper. We don't need loads, but we do want to see a few white highlights, so you know, look on your picture exactly kind of where the whitest areas are, and just gently just rub along some of those white pencil marks that you popped in where you pressed hard, and it will just lift them out a little bit. Like I said, we don't want to obviously rub it all out, it is just lifting. I just need to clean that. I don't want to carry the dirt and spread it onto the picture, so it's obviously got some nice white bits here, so I can lift those off. And we've got a few bits here, so I can clean some of those up a little bit. Those edges, and I'm just going to just make sure I've got a nice sort of sharp edge to that. I'm just going to lift carefully a few strands into this area here. Obviously don't want to lose all that dark that we built up, but if there were a few bits just to give it a bit of variation, lift out the bits that are really catching that light. There's obviously a few strands. There's a bit here, I just want to try and lift a bit of this off a little bit more. And just take your time doing this, you don't need to rush. Oops, try not to drop everything. Just make sure you remove any bits of rubber that are stuck to your picture as well. Okay, that's starting to take some shape a little bit now. And if, like here, that's kind of lifted out a bit more than I intended, you can always just go back in with a colour that you've used in that area. Like I'm just going to push back slightly that. My pain's grey 60 just because that looks a bit strange. And you know, you can always go back in and put any bits back in as you need to. Like this bit, I'm just going to add a darker bit underneath. Lift that white out a bit. It's more that purpley colour there. I think my violet grey needs to come out. I don't want too much here, but I just want to get a couple of little marks underneath some of that white just to make it stand out a little bit more in places. Like I said, not too much, but just softly. Also like the tip of some of those that are blended in a bit more, you know, they're not bright white all the way along. Having a few well placed sort of darker bits just next to the whites will just help to make it stand out a little bit more really. And like here, I've not put very much in this section here, just a few well placed bits of pencil where it's lighter. And that should just about do it. Just give it a good sweep. And that's pretty much the top section of the eye. And obviously this is kind of the trickier section, to be honest. There's quite a lot going on with lots of hairs and highlights and things, whereas when we move down here, this should be a bit more straightforward with more solid colours and just an illusion of the hair, whereas here we've put in quite a bit of the detail. So we'll move into looking how to do some of this shorter hair below the eye that's a bit flatter, not quite so much detail going on, but how we can simply create that effect.